Jon Wilner, the Wilner Report, joins us on 365 Sports. John texted me earlier today about a column he's written about the proposal on the format of the college football playoff that is headed to 14 before they even play 12. And then also a couple other things. He had another article about the power structure entering 2024 with the 4 schools from the Pac-12 entering the Big 12. We'll get to that. John, thank you very much for reaching out to me earlier. So we've been of the impression, or most of the opinion, that the Big 12 and the ACC should by no means accept being relegated to second fiddle. But your column today, you think that this may not be such a bad idea.
I think that they should take the deal in a heartbeat. And the main reason is, well, there's a couple of reasons. One is it values them pretty highly, right? I mean, they're given, in terms of access, they get 2 bids. SEC and Big Ten get 3. They're getting 2/3 of the value. And I would argue that there's no other metric used in college sports that would value the ACC and Big 12 at 2/3 of the Big Ten and SEC, right? TV money, playoff bids, brand, audience. None of those metrics would give the new ACC and the new Big 12 a 2/3 valuation. The other thing, too, is what's the alternative? That's, to me, that's the biggest issue, right? The alternative could be that they only get 1 automatic bid. The alternative could be that there's only at-large bids. And I would argue that the ACC and Big 12 should take the chance to get a collective 4 out of 14, right? They're in it together, essentially. You got a chance to get 4 out of the 14 guaranteed, I would take it.
What about the automatic first-round bye of the Big 12, where the Big 12 and ACC is left out? Is that a kicker that would change your mind? Yeah, okay.
That's garbage. I think they should call their bluff on that. And if that means, like, if the SEC and Big Ten said, we'll give you 2 automatic bids, but you got to take us getting the opening round buys with the top 2 seeds, they should call their bluff. Say, no way. And dare them to go off and form their own playoff, because I don't think they really want to go form their own playoff. There's a lot of complications to that. I'm not sure that ESPN wants that to happen. I would call their bluff and tell them to pound sand. Certainly, you cannot give them automatic buys before the season even starts. That's preposterous. I think that that's a negotiating ploy for them to get something else, whether it's governance, voting rights in the governance structure, or whether it's a revenue deal. I think that that's a negotiation tactic.
Yeah, John, I just could not imagine the Big 12 athletic directors and Brett Yarmark, and the same with Jim Phillips and his ADs, trying to explain to his coaches why you can be 13-0 entering the playoff and number 2 in the country and not get a bye. Like that.
No, well, I mean, it'd be bad for the sport, right? Now, I'm one who believes the last group of people you should be listening to is the coaches. When you're trying to develop a structure to benefit the sport, but to me, I mean, it's just not tenable for anybody, and I'm not sure. It's an insult also to the Big Ten and the SEC schools. It's like, you know what, we may not be good enough to do this when everybody knows they should be good enough to do it every year. It's ridiculous. I think that you know how they started off this thing with trying to get 4 automatic bids for the SEC and Big Ten. I think that was a negotiating ploy to get it to 3, and I think that the top 2 seed thing is a negotiating ploy to get something else out of the ACC and Big 12.
So you're of the belief, and I think most people realize the money part of it, about how powerful the Big Ten and SEC are, and if you don't know, let them tell you. But at the same time, it's reality, as you said. The logos, the brands, the attendance, and all of that. What about the percentage of the pie, of the 100% pie of the college football playoff when it goes to 14? Should those 2 conferences have more entering, no matter how many teams they may get into the playoff?
I think that they probably should have the revenue be commensurate with the number of automatic bids. And then there's also a separate pool for the at-large teams. And then there's going to have to be a separate pool for Notre Dame and the Group of Five, right? I mean, you can't. That's got to be accounted for. So, like, to me, why don't you make 60% of it is in the guaranteed pool, so that's based on your automatic bids, and then 40% is based on the at-large and Notre Dame and the Group of Five, or something like that. That's how I think they'll end up breaking it down. And the other piece to it is, right, we all know it's going to 16. I don't know if it'll be in 2 years or in 5 years, but it's going to go to 16. If the Big 12 and ACC have 2 automatic bids in the 14-team playoff, that positions them for a better deal in the 16-team playoff. You're kind of negotiating now for your status in the future. And the higher your floor now, the better off you're going to be in the 16-team event.
John, I had always contended that Greg Sankey, one of the reasons he didn't initially propose this, and of course things have kind of worked out his way anyway, because they always do, that he didn't want automatic qualifiers was because he wanted to be able to say most years, like, look, I got 5 out of the 14 or 5 out of the 12. Or look at this year, I got 6 out of the 12. And if he gave up automatic qualifier spots, that means he would never get to that number. But he may now even get to that, especially if they go to 16 anyway.
Yeah, well, even in the 14 team, I mean, if you kind of game it out, right, if the SEC has 3 autos in a 14 team and there's 3 at-large bids, right, in a year where Notre Dame isn't great, those 3 automatic bids are probably going to get split between the SEC and the Big Ten. So the SEC could get 2 of them. So there may be some years where they have 5. I kind of figured that it would be an average of 4 total. If those 2 leagues each got 3 automatics, they'd on average they'd get 1 more at large. But it may be a little more than that, maybe 4.5 total. A lot of it would depend on what the criteria is for Notre Dame getting in, because they don't have a conference right there. They're going to have to be at large. Know that they will assign a whole separate criteria for the Irish.
John, how was it taken? There was a lot of, I guess, expectation on social media that Kirk Schulz would be able to put up a bit more of a fight than I guess he ended up being able to put up in terms of holding out and disrupting any change to the playoff. What's kind of the reaction been, and was that expected on your end that was not going to be as much of a hiccup as maybe some thought it could be?
Yeah, I never got the sense from him that he was going to hold the whole thing up. I think he wanted to have a chance to make the case for the Pac-12 to be given a seat at the table starting in 2026, right, when there's the whole new contract cycle. But the bottom line is there is no table in 2026. There's nothing at this point. And it's also hard. He was doing it because he thinks that it's going to be the Pac-8 or the Pac-10 by then, because they are going to rebuild the conference. But I also feel like he knew the writing was on the wall. I think it was more of a, let's do our due diligence here and make our case, try to stay as relevant as possible. But I never, ever got the sense from him, and I've spoken to him a number of times over the last, 6-9 months, that he was going to hold up the move to 5-7. Because 5-7 is better for Washington State and Oregon State, because they have to get in through the at-large pool.
What is most likely to happen? The WAC adds those 2, or Washington State, Oregon State somehow get most or a lot from the WAC and create a different conference, or whether they call it the Pac whatever again?
Well, I think that they're going to call it the Pac something. And it's got to be 8 teams, according to NCAA rules, there has to be 8 teams minimum by the 2026 football season. I think what they're going to do is execute a reverse merger, and they're going to probably end up taking the best 8 or 9, 7, 8, 9 from the Mountain West, and then they may try to add from the Americans. They may try to get into Texas a little. Rice, Tulane, Memphis, I don't know exactly what their thinking is, but I've heard that theory that they would want to try to expand the footprint outside of just kind of the Mountain and the Pacific time zones.
What would be their, so say Florida State and Clemson blow up the ACC, would they kind of hold out hope that they might get roped into there, or is that maybe more of a long shot for them?
Well, no, they're holding out hope that they're going to get into the Big 12 if everything blows apart. If Tallahassee there's a ripple effect and the ACC collapses, they're hoping that the whole thing kind of restructures and they get into, I'm not even sure you could call it the Big 12 at that point, because it would be like 2014 massive conference that is basically opposing the SEC and the Big Ten. I don't know exactly what it would be like, but that's kind of their hope is, hey, you know what? Let's see if we can get in the Big 12 eventually. I think the chances of them getting into the ACC are 0. I think the chances of them eventually getting into the Big 12 are probably 1%, but it's not 0. And the other thing they're wondering, if the ACC does move apart, would Stanford and Cal just come back out west, right? If they can't get in the Big 10, will they come back and help Washington State and Oregon State reform the conference? Because if you have Stanford, Stanford's got a national brand and has some appeal to the networks. You could rebuild something that would not be a bad football conference.
Jon, what's it like? You had the cozy and geographically sensible setup with the Pac-12, and we know what happened there. For you as a reporter now, it's scattered all over the country. You got Cal and Stanford in the ACC. You got schools in the Big 12. You got schools in the Big 10. How do you approach this? Does it make it better in some ways? I'd imagine travel-wise, no, but the stories, you're now covering, I guess, on a daily basis, 4 conferences or 5 still with the Washington State, Oregon State, P2. What's that like on your end? Is it more work? What does that look like?
It's fascinating. I should preface this by saying that I feel terrible for Oregon State and Washington State, right, and for the athletes and the people at those schools who work there, and everybody is facing budget cuts. But for me, it is absolutely fascinating, and I think it's going to be an incredible next 2 years, 3 years in college sports, and especially college football. All of the issues the NCAA is dealing with, athletes becoming employees, portal, NIL, the playoff, the House lawsuit for $5 billion or whatever it is. I mean, to me, the ACC, it is the most interesting time ever in college sports. And the things that happen off the field are going to affect all the schools on the field, their budgets, their recruiting, ability to retain coaches, everything. And I'm really looking forward to how it all evolves and writing about it from the perspective of all these schools. It doesn't matter to me what conference banner they're participating under. It's still fascinating stuff, and the fans are still super interested.
Yeah, we've had to look at the possibility over the last 12 to 14 years ourselves. And when people die, the Big 12's dead. All right, well, then who do we cover, and what does that include as far as anybody new or maybe or not? Jon, you also had an article. You shared it with me on the Big 12 and where the power rankings are now. And, of course, the conference has grown with the 4 schools from the Pac-12. How many of those 4, Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado, do you feel, at least as of now, are a part of the upper half of the Big 12?
Yeah, I think Utah and Arizona are well positioned. I'm picking the Utes to win it based on what we know right now. And, with the transfer portal opening in the second half of April, you kind of have to rethink everything once we get through that stage. But right now, I really like Utah to win it. I think that they would have competed for the Pac-12 championship this year if they hadn't been absolutely decimated with injuries and not had their quarterback for the entire season. And I'm a big believer with injuries that there's typically a reversion to the mean. And if Utah had this outlier season last year with injuries, that they're going to be pretty healthy. this upcoming season, and if they're pretty healthy, I think that they've got a great chance to win it. And I think Kansas, Oklahoma State, Arizona, maybe Kansas State. To me, that looks like the top tier. But when I was going through it, the interesting thing now that you have to account for, and I did this when I did Big Ten power rankings too, is the scheduling, right? Because there's so many misses, and who you miss is a crucial component, I think, to how you pick the conference.
I want to go back when I asked you about the WAC. It's the Mountain West. Someone corrected me in the chat. Yeah, the Mountain West, not the WAC. I'm still going back to when Arizona State was independent, too. So I'm a little bit different with that. Craig?
Yeah, John, with Arizona, is that all because of having the big-time quarterback, the big-time wide receiver, and Fafita McMillan? You lose Jed Fish, obviously, to Washington, but it doesn't seem like they've really lost any steam in terms of people feeling like they can come into the Big 12 and make some noise. Is that because of those two primarily, given the turnover this offseason?
Yeah, I think so. For sure, those two. Jacob Manu is an all-conference linebacker. I think Brent Brennan was the right hire for them, and he retained a lot of guys. I mean, they lost far fewer players to Washington than Washington lost to Alabama and to the transfer portal. I mean, Washington's roster was completely decimated. Arizona's is not. And I think that there's a lot of momentum there for them. And again, that was also an issue where I looked at the schedule. I thought, you know what, not only the misses break for them pretty good, but also the home road situation. I mean, teams that have got, to me, the teams that have to play Arizona and Utah and Kansas State, right? Those teams are at a disadvantage compared to teams that are going to end up playing, Cincinnati and UCF, Houston, and you have to really kind of dig into the schedule model that the Big 12 set up to kind of see how that's going to impact the race.
John, just real quick, I want to go back to Utah. We've never gotten a chance to interview. I guess Smokey did one time, Kyle Whittingham, right?
Yep.
But we've never, the three of us,
and
haven't.
I enjoyed the hell out of it.
Yeah. Would grizzled be a good adjective for Kyle Whittingham?
Yeah, I'd go with grizzled. I don't think that's the only adjective, but grizzled, sure. He's been Utah's coach since he took over for Urban Meyer. I think it was December of 2004. Right, he's been there for 20 years as a head coach. That alone makes him an anomaly. I'm not sure if there's anybody currently coaching that could approach 20 years on the job. I might be missing some. Yeah, right. Is Gundy the same? 20 years?
Pretty close.
Pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. So Grizzly, but he's also, I would say, wise. He is tough as nails. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw. They had a Game Day did a broadcast. I can't remember. It might have been I don't remember who Utah was playing at home. Might have been Oregon. And he rode up on his motorcycle to the Game Day set, like he was riding with Dennis Hopper in a movie. But so he's got he's a very interesting guy. I think he's a phenomenal coach. And I'm sure, you guys will eventually have him on. He's really sharp, too. He understands the big picture of college sports in a way that, a lot of the younger coaches I don't think do.
John, thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Thanks for reaching out to me and us. Jon Wilner, the Pac-12 hotline, the Wilner Hotline now, and also a part of a slew of the newspapers in the California area with us on 365 Sports.
Dennis Hopper, now there was a wild